topic that has come up multiple times during the last couple of panels, which is the issue of resilience. And obviously, we've been seeing extreme weather events all over the world. And so we're delighted to have a panel to close us up on this very positive topic, if I may be a bit sarcastic, building for resiliency in an era of climate change and extreme weather. It's going to be moderated by Craig Sabine of Navigant. And so, Craig, over to you to introduce your panel.
Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks. So, as Lawrence mentioned, we're going to be talking about resiliency. It's the end of the conference. I just swooped in. I'm very apologies to you all for not being here for a couple of days. Looks like it's been a great couple of days, and I thank the EI and Daniel and Lawrence for asking me to moderate this panel. And we're really proud to have sponsored this as Navigant. Those Canadians in the room, many of the Canadians in the room know me from the last couple of decades of helping them through many of the challenges that you've been discussing over the last couple of days. But for the rest of this great global audience, Navigant, of course, is a global consulting firm who does support utility and energy companies with a considerable focus in this sector and these challenges and opportunities that you've been discussing the last couple of days. One thing that's become very germane to much of our strategy work and our implementation work as well is resiliency, and it seems to be becoming more pertinent on a much more often basis right across the world. And we have a panel today who will give us some different geographical perspectives, as well as I think some different professional perspectives as well. There's some diversity here in terms of project and capital management and operations and risk management, and we should get a good set of lenses on the challenges that resiliency is putting before us, and some of the opportunities that are in there as well. So I think the key themes here that we'll talk about are what are the big risks, what are the identified risks to power systems, and there'll be a bit of a regional overlay on that in our 10-minute introductions. And what are the panelists' experiences in increasing reliability and resiliency, and getting over some challenges and barriers that are there on the regulatory front, on the policy front, and on the cost front, of course. And what's the awareness, and how does the regulatory compact look at the costs that are necessary to create resilient systems, and weigh that against the demand for efficiency and cost management, of course. So maybe with that, I'll toss it down to Devon, and he can share his perspectives from the Turks and Caicos. Devon is Senior Vice President of Operations and Assistant Secretary, Corporate Secretary at FortisTCI.
That's correct. Well, firstly, let me thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak to you and to be a part of this prestigious panel. But before I even get into the topic of building for resiliency in an era of climate change and extreme weather, let me first tell you a little bit about FortisTCI. So FortisTCI is a subsidiary of Fortis Inc. and is the sole provider of electricity in the Turks and Caicos Islands. FortisTCI operates 4 vertically integrated utilities in the Turks and Caicos with a consolidated peak of consolidated installed capacity of 91 megawatts and a consolidated peak of 42 megawatts. We serve about 15,000 or so customers, and our transmission system operates at 34.5 kilovolts, sorry, and the distribution is 12.47 kilovolts. So it just kind of tells you how small we are as a service territory, but a volt is a volt and a watt is a watt, right? And so, but the building for resiliency in an era of climate change is something that obviously is dear to my heart and dear to the hearts of the people of the Turks and Caicos and the FortisTCI. Tourism is our main industry, and people pay millions and millions of dollars to come to the Turks and Caicos and build homes there and to live there. And so one of our main objectives is to make sure that we can provide a grid that is resilient. And many of you would have known or have not known, but I'll say right now, we experienced 2 major Category 5 hurricanes in September 2017. One on the 7th and the other one on the 22nd. So Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Maria. And these hurricanes really tested our distribution system. And since Fortis purchased the utility in 2006, all of our investments have been really to make the grid robust and resilient. And so I can tell you after those hurricanes passed, I jumped into my car and I drove along the main roads and I looked and I saw all the investment that was done in 2006 up until the hurricane 2007. And I was just like jumping for joy, the fact that the grid was still standing. And then I drove further into the island, and everything outside of that, before 2006 investment, and the island was completely flat. All the poles was on the ground. And so I got on the phone and I told the Fortis group of companies, say, hey, we need help and we need it now. But everything since then we've built it to a category to withstand Category 3, Category 4 hurricanes, using Class 1 poles, Class 2 poles as a minimum. And so our distribution system, transmission system is pretty sturdy, and it's been proven based on our Hurricane 2017 to show that everything that we've built actually stood the test. All of our buildings, a lot of our investment was new, and all of our buildings stood through the hurricanes, and so we only had like superficial damages. And that's important because we're vertically integrated. We generate, we transmit, and we distribute. And so it allows us to focus primarily on our distribution system. The way our transmission system is set up now, we actually have, we designed to N-1. So we have an overhead transmission line, and we have an underground transmission line. The island is pretty small, so we get an opportunity to do that. So we're benefiting from the smallness of the Turks and Caicos. But I can tell you, storms are nothing to play with, and it is our major risk because we are actually located in the Caribbean basin. Every single year, we are threatened by a hurricane. Every single year. And now, we don't always get hit, thank you, Lord, but every single year we're threatened. And even as I speak and present right now, a hurricane that was lined up for the Turks and Caicos Islands, Hurricane Dorian, actually caused mass destruction on 2 neighboring islands, Abaco and Freeport. So these are nothing to joke with. I mean, I was telling my colleague here that I prefer to go through a winter storm because at the end of the day, you know, your house is still standing. It may be locked in with ice, but your house is still standing. So these are things that we're continuously looking at. How do we make our system robust? And everything going forward, we've been building it to a Category 3, Category 4, Category 5 rating in order to make sure that we can withstand these storms. So since the hurricane in 2017, and it's a fact on the Caribbean, there have been lots of talks about resiliency. What is resiliency? And so our government, along with FortisTCI, partnered with Rocky Mountain Institute to look at what we call a resilient national energy transition strategy. And so in that, the plan is to look at renewable energy. How can we use renewable energy as a means in order to make your system more resilient? Because right now we're at a centralized plant. We have one plant at the main island, Providenciales, and then the other locations, there's only one plant there. And so we're looking at renewable energy as a means to help us make our system more resilient. And so right now we have about 1 megawatt of renewable energy on our 42 megawatt peak system, and the plan is to have additional renewable energy onto our system. In fact, another 10 megawatts we want to install by the year within the next 5 years, and we hope to have about 33% of our peak load by the year 2040. So that's part of the roadmap that is being laid out for us, and so we're excited about those opportunities. We're also looking at taking advantage of the rooftop. I've heard lots of conversations about rooftops, but we see that as one of our major threats. Because the island experiences sun around the clock, pretty much, It's one of those issues that can pretty much interrupt our business. And so we are looking at strategies. How do we take advantage of rooftops? So we are renting rooftops. So if you have a large rooftop, we see it, we invest in it, and we give you part of the earnings. And so that's one of our strategies. And as a result, we're able to put our 1 megawatt based on that. The regulations makes it very difficult for us to go ahead and put up utility scale renewable energy because it takes so long. I'll give you an example. We've been working with the government body for 3 years now trying to be able to do a 1 megawatt utility scale project. And the regulations right now don't support that, but so we're able to do it by using rooftops. And so that's been part of our strategy, and we've been pushing to do that. And we want to use renewable energy, like I said earlier, in order to help us with our resiliency, to give us more microgrids on the system. In the event we should have a major bust up in other areas, we can still use those microgrids to help us out with energy generation. So that's pretty much some of my introduction. I look forward to being able to get into more discussion with you as we continue to progress in our panel discussion. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Devon. I'm going to pass it to Paul Lee now, who is the Director of System Operations at AltaLink here in Alberta, Canada. So I think some of the challenges faced in the heartland of one of the bigger countries in the world are probably much different than what Devon experiences, but some of the solutions may be similar.
Thank you very much, and again, I'll echo Devon's comments. It's an honor to be here, to have the opportunity to speak, and it's been a humbling experience for me listening to the wealth of knowledge and experience that the panelists have shared over the last couple of days. Maybe I'll start with introducing AltaLink just a little bit here first. AltaLink started in 2002 when we purchased the transmission assets from TransAlta. And at that point, we became the first independent transmission company in Canada. We currently serve 85% of Alberta's population through 300 substations and about 13,000 kilometers of transmission line, or 8,100 miles for the Americans in the room. We also commissioned and put into service Alberta's first 500 kV HVDC line called the Western Alberta Transmission Line in December of 2015. This HVDC line is approximately 350 kilometers and spans from Edmonton to Calgary. We currently have about 750 employees, and we were acquired by Berkshire Hathaway Energy in 2014, which has actually been a very positive experience for us and also a privilege to be part of the family of utilities in the BHE umbrella. So the topic of this panel is grid resilience, but I'll perhaps take a slightly different slant to it and maybe speak more so to the operational prudency and managing public safety in a period of climate change and extreme events. You know, again, there is a grid resilience aspect to it, but you know, Alberta, as Devon mentioned, we're known for our winter storms. They're not pleasant, but I will take that over a hurricane as well. But for today, I'm going to focus not so much on winter storms, but on the other end in another season, which is wildfires. We've been paying very close attention to what has been happening in California and Western North America, where wildfires have dominated headlines in recent years. We're fortunate that we've had generally clear skies this summer, but if you were in BC or Alberta last year, you would have noticed that nice hazy smoke that probably filled your lungs for most of the summer. We've been fortunate this year, but again, you know, it's something that we're keeping an eye on. Last year, the Camp Fire down in California, also known as the Paradise Fire, caused over $17 billion of damages and over 85 fatalities. Truly one of the most horrific wildfires in U.S. history, with CAL FIRE concluding that PG&E started the fire with one of its transmission lines. And so as a transmission company, we notice that and we take note and, you know, again, try to incorporate that into our risk management. Earlier this year, the Californian government passed a Senate bill that required all Californian utilities to submit a wildfire mitigation plan. And one of our sister companies, Pacific Power, has assets in Northern California. And what they were able to do was share with us this framework, and we were able to apply this wildfire mitigation framework into our jurisdiction, which made sense to us because fires do not recognize borders. We've also been working very closely with our other BHE sister companies such as Rocky Mountain Power, NV Energy, and Mid-American Energy, and really working collaboratively with other California utilities to share best practices and apply those learnings to our service area when it comes to wildfire. We took the opportunity earlier this spring in Alberta to file a comprehensive wildfire mitigation plan with the Alberta Utilities Commission. And so this would be the first time that such a comprehensive plan has been put in front of the Commission. For the next 3 years, from 2019 to 2021, AltaLink forecasts that we will have a capital expenditure of $35 million and operational expenditure of $3 million just to manage the wildfire risk and public safety. Components of the wildfire mitigation plan are as follows, and maybe I'll just kind of walk through the few areas that we're focused on. The first is wildfire risk mapping. This is an exercise that we have taken on since late last year, and it's very similar to the methodology taken on in California, where we are actually running, I'll call it a simulation in terms of burn likelihood and burn impact of our service area. And so the burn likelihood takes into account the types of fuel, the amount of fuel, climatography, the topography, prevailing winds, and essentially tells you how likely is it that if you were to drop a match or if your power line were to start a fire, how quickly would it burn? And the burn impact would be the layer where we would consider the impact to communities, human life, and infrastructure. And you add that up and that gives you that risk-based approach, which really tells us where our hot spots are in our service area and where to focus our incremental efforts. The other piece that we're looking at or working to beef up is our situational awareness. So we have been working with fire weather specialists and fire behavior specialists to perform daily fire weather forecasting and modeling. So essentially they tell us on a 7-day out forecast how risky are we or how likely is it that we will encounter conditions that could result in a catastrophic wildfire. The other pieces would be to install our own weather stations and cameras in strategic locations. Again, we would highlight what the most high-risk areas are and deploy those assets. The other piece is system hardening. So this is where the grid resilience piece does come into play. We have taken a look at our assets to determine where we would be best served to upgrade our components and our structures. So for example, wooden crossarms. I'm sure we all have wooden crossarms in our system, wooden poles. That is the norm. But if we do know that we have our assets going through a high-risk fire area, those are the areas where we would consider perhaps using fiberglass crossarms or upgrading to steel structures. And in other cases, we might actually just want to rebuild the whole line. There may be our current design standard actually calls for extra insulation and, like I said, non-wooden crossarms and beefier structures. So that's another piece that we are considering. Inspections and corrections is another area that we are ramping up efforts in. So in a situation, we actually do annual patrols of our power lines every year, once a year. And in those high-risk fire areas, we would be increasing the frequency to twice a year, and in some cases actually doing detailed patrol or a DAP every 3 years rather than the traditional 5 or 7 years. The other areas are also vegetation and right-of-way management. So again, we take a look at our right-of-ways, determine if there's any further right-of-way expansion that we would need to take on, again, to help manage the fire risk or the ignition risk. The last piece I'll speak to is an interesting one, and it's in the area of public safety power shutoff, otherwise known as PSPS. And what this really is proactive de-energization. And I'll take a moment here because the term proactive there's a nuance. As operators of utilities, we all do de-energize from time to time to manage public safety or whatever conditions may exist. But in this case here, proactive is truly the essence of the real meaning of proactive. There's been no event. There's been no active fires. And what we're doing here is managing or monitoring the wildfire or the fire threat conditions to shut the power off as a last resort before an ignition occurs or before a fire occurs. And that's been an interesting journey for us in Alberta. If we look at what's going on in California, PSPS plans have been in place. Even this past summer, PG&E has proactively de-energized parts of their system a few times over the summer. But for us, one of the challenges is to really engage in that conversation with our regulator and our customers in Alberta. The other piece that's a little tough for us as well is being the only transmission-only company. Our customers are typically direct connect customers, which would essentially be refineries and so forth, but other distribution companies. So that's one thing that we are working through over the fall here. We do intend to have our own PSPS protocols in place before the end of the year, but that's been an interesting area for us. And like I mentioned, we had submitted this wildfire mitigation plan as part of our general tariff application, and the Commission earlier this summer had asked us to put on a wildfire education session to help educate interveners and customers and the ISO and other stakeholders. So that was very helpful in terms of facilitating this ongoing discussion, and our GTA hearing is set for the end of November. And with that, that's my introduction, and I'll pass it on here.
Great, thank you, Paul. And last, certainly not least, is Rod Eagles, who's the Director of Corporate Project Management at New Brunswick Power on our Atlantic Coast side here in Canada, who would like to share his perspectives on this and what's going on in New Brunswick, which of course had at least some tertiary, secondary impacts of a hurricane last week.
Thank you, and thanks again to the organizers of this event. And I'd be amiss if I didn't thank my boss for telling me that she couldn't come and asked me if I could come all the way to Vancouver. My wife is enjoying the time as well. Just a few words on NB Power. We are a vertically integrated company, and so we are both generating, transmitting, distributing, and we operate the system operator in our region as well. We have 6,800 kilometers of transmission line. We are interconnected with 15 interconnections to neighboring provinces, Quebec, PEI, Nova Scotia, and also to Maine in the New England area. Within that transmission system, there's about 100 terminals and industrial substations where we have direct connect customers. So my comments today are really going to touch on grid resiliency in three different areas: severe weather threats, smarter grid, and cyber threats. So this discussion on grid resiliency for us is quite timely given the events of last week with Hurricane Dorian, and for us in New Brunswick, we only saw the tail end of that and ended up with about 80,000 customers out of service, but our neighbors in Nova Scotia, I think was mentioned yesterday, had upwards of 500,000 customers without power. For us in our system, we have about 350,000 customers, and so 80,000 customers is quite a sizable portion of our customer base. But we had several other storms in the last 5 years which have also impacted us, and so the frequency of severe weather in our area is becoming, well, almost normal. Post-tropical storm Arthur in 2014 left us with almost 300,000 of our 350,000 customers out of power. That was not a fun weekend to be camping, by the way. Ice storms in January 2017, again, hundreds of thousands of customers out of service. Floods in the last 2 years in the springs, affecting primarily distribution customers and lots of activity associated with disconnects of homes that are affected by flooding, windstorms that have taken down both transmission and distribution poles, and of course the hurricane this past week. It's clear that the weather's changing and climate change is real, and we've got to come to grips with that. And how do we prepare ourselves for more frequent severe weather? And in that, my team is focused on really construction of new facilities or rebuilding of existing facilities. And there's a couple of examples that we've had where we've taken into account resiliency and in fact increased the level of design standard for those facilities. An LNG facility in St. John where we replaced existing single pole 69 kV line with H-frame line or H-frame structures designed to the CSA severe standard. Not just to protect our customer, but also to protect the many customers of that LNG product, which flows down into New England and has quite a bearing on their electrical supply. We also had, in severe weather storms, transmission lines to one of our northeastern islands blown down across the causeway. Well, temporarily those poles were replaced with wood pole structures, and over the last year and a half we had replaced all of those structures with concrete foundation, steel pole structures with steel cross arms and the like to provide protection against severe weather in that area where high winds are possible, but the biggest risk that they have in that area is ice storms, which have happened there many times in the last year. So we spend about $300 million per year in rebuilding and reinforcing our systems and with new capital works. And much of that happens on the right-of-way with the rebuilding of transmission lines, but is also expanded now into right-of-way widening, vegetation management practices, which are similar probably to what's going on in AltaLink, and applying lessons from our previous storms as well is important. And within that, we've deployed now an incident command structure that's quite popularly used in dealing with a response to severe incidents of any kind. We use it with our nuclear facility to provide incident command on training, I guess, for and practicing for events that would occur there. Now we've rolled that out to our Energy Control Center, both with the PSO and the DSO. Transitioning to a smarter grid, and we've heard a number of people speak this week about microgrids and how does that impact the resiliency of the grids in those areas. And that microgrid is really for us an opportunity to take advantage of renewable energies, but also to provide those customers with a resilient supply of electricity in the event of feeder, distribution, or transmission outages in those areas. And so employing AMI for the advanced sensoring of those customers, also sensors on the distribution feeders and on, sort of combined with already an extensive monitoring of transmission facilities allows customers to I guess, have their information known well ahead of time by our PSO and DSO. One of the comments that came up recently is that in outage storms, many customers believe that we know, everybody that's out. Well, in fact, the matter is we don't know who's out of power. We may know which feeder's out of power, but how far down that feeder has the power outage been impacted. And so even when we sometimes think that we've restored a feeder, a customer still may be out. And so AMI, I think, is going to be a big part of that. Although I was hoping for a much clearer answer on the AMI question about how do we, calculate the advantage so that it's easy to convince the regulator to approve that, which we are, in fact, going back to the regulator on our AMI case here later this year. We are working with the federal government. We've a demonstration project with Natural Resources Canada, with Siemens, ourselves, and Nova Scotia Power in two towns, one in Shediac in New Brunswick and one in Amherst in Nova Scotia, to build some microgrids and to demonstrate various pieces of that microgrid technology, looking for a number of homes, 500 homes, which, about 100 of each would be deployed with different kinds of technology that we can then monitor over the next 5 years to determine, what are the incentives that drive customers to change behaviors in the way that they operate, and the way that we can then monitor their consumption of electricity as well. So that will fit into this idea of, lots of microgrids having an impact higher up in the transmission area. Cybersecurity is the last of the areas I wanted to talk about. It's really critical. And we know that now every product that we buy and put into our system and our protection and control areas is digital. They all have passwords, and they all can be affected by the Internet of Threats. Was that yesterday or this morning? And so we've built a cybersecurity team that's helping us to manage all of those threats and to put the right kinds of infrastructure, software, policies, processes, and procedures in place to control those digital certificates and access keys to get into those facilities, whether they're physical facilities or whether they're digital facilities, and testing those with external third parties as well as friendly hackers to determine the robustness of the protection that we've put in place. So we've partnered with Siemens again, and we do a lot of work with Siemens in New Brunswick, and Siemens, along with the University of New Brunswick, and ourselves and the province of New Brunswick, have developed a cybersecurity hub, I would say, a world global cybersecurity center in Fredericton. It's under construction right now, and that will be a big part of the sort of growing cybersecurity technology in the province of New Brunswick, of which we're playing a big part of as well. So I think I'll leave my comments there, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Rod. Happy that you mentioned the AMI project, which of course we'll be walking down the aisle hand in hand on before the regulator in New Brunswick. So I'm glad that it appears that the delegation here isn't quite out of gas yet. There's been a lot of questions coming in. So I'm going to try and wrap a couple concepts into one, but definitely it appears that folks want to cut right to one of the bigger or the heart of the matter, I suppose, and one of the bigger challenges, which is justifying costs of resiliency and weighing that against the level of resiliency that you're targeting, or really what is an appropriate level of resiliency to some of these issues that have been being discussed. But I also want to just kind of come back and bring it up a level quickly. We did a survey in the EU last year to TSOs across Europe, and asking them if their investment plans or their infrastructure investment plans specifically addressed climate change adaptation within those investment strategies. And 90% of the respondents said that they did not at that time. However, we are hearing that there are investments being made in some fairly tactical issues. If you want to think about specifically a hurricane, something tactical, or a wildfire, or cybersecurity issues. But if you wrap that up to, is all of this really about a changing climate and a changing trend in how our systems are going to be influenced by the environment around them? Do you all see that cost versus cost management problem to be an easier sell for regulators and ratepayers, or is that challenge still ever present? Who wants to start?
I can start. Firstly, everyone wants reliability, but no one really wants to pay for it. That's the running joke, right? But we try to base our investment on safety, reliability, and growth. Turks and Caicos is still very much a growing market. And so what we do is that the opportunity we have to expand our network to pick up new customers, we build in the resiliency when we're putting in new customers. And so that's how we've been expanding our grid as well, with more robust and more resilient infrastructure. But at the end of the day, no one really wants to pay for it. And so what we've been doing is just building it, adding it on to our newer infrastructure as we get customer requests. And so we do that. So that's how we've been doing for the most part. That's how we've been addressing a lot of our resiliency strategies through growth.
Rod?
I'll take a quick stab at it as well. Maybe not so quick. I guess I get sometimes called on that. Within our capital portfolio, we select our projects using a scaling system to look at both risk and impact to the company, as well impact to customers and safety, et cetera. So we rank all of these projects in order to define whether they can be part of our capital portfolio for the coming year. The benefit, I guess, or the value of being a vertically integrated company is that we really control all the capital for the entire company within one roof, and so we do have to make some decisions about whether to spend it in generation, transmission, distribution, or nuclear, or corporate services. But having the obligation to serve our customers, the identification of those critical infrastructures, like that transmission line to the LNG plant, just becomes part of our evaluation of that risk to our customer, and so we're able to gauge that ourselves. We don't have to, I guess, specifically justify projects like that with our internal regulator, our provincial regulator. It becomes part of the capital portfolio that they do view on a larger scale, but not at the individual project level like that.
And I think for us, one of the challenges is that it is sometimes hard to quantify the risk, but we do our best to do so. Ultimately, as we move forward, we'll always come across new data, improved data, and it is incumbent on all of us to act on that. So that's the story that we've been trying to tell with our regulator and our stakeholders. And for the most part, they've been willing to come along for the ride. It's uncomfortable at first, but again, if you take the stab at trying to quantify it, and like I said, really identify and assess the risk, that's the approach that we've been taking.
So, Paul, there's actually a direct question here to you as well on this topic area, which was, you mentioned the $35 million expenditure. And, does AltaLink believe that the regulator will support that as something that ratepayer would fund, or is it adequately compensated already for in your return on equity position? I think I know who it might have came from too, but we'll leave that alone.
So the $35 million is incremental to what we would have originally put forth in our GTA. And so in doing that, you could say it's obvious that AltaLink believes that it should be approved because we put it forward. We put a business case forward. We do believe it's the right thing to do, and again, it is based on the identification and the quantification of risk. We've been working with the AUC on this. Again, the AUC asked AltaLink to lead I'll call it a wildfire education session in July, which was received quite positively with both the Commission and the ISO and the interveners, because again, someone's got to start the conversation, and the AUC did a great job of doing that. So the short answer is yes, we believe that we have a solid case that we've put in front of the Commission, and that we believe it is an incremental ask to what has been filed with the Commission before.
Great, thanks, Paul. And sorry for putting you on the spot. So maybe we'll switch gears a little bit here. Some of the other themes that have been emerging in the questions is something that we had discussed prior, is the idea of building resilience through more distributed assets. Microgrids has been mentioned a couple times now. And of course, systems can be designed that way. Ultimately, redundancy creates resilience. So if you have both a centralized system and layered on top a more decentralized system or distributed energy resource-based system, which of course is becoming more and more a hot topic and where investment dollars are going, is that a path to greater resiliency? How does that work? And do you see that as something that, you know, the shareholder and the ratepayer will be able to come to agreement on?
Maybe I'll take a first stab at it. So the question is being around, you know, what's the role of microgrid and how can that play a role in resilience? Absolutely it can. I think most of our current operating philosophy is to manage the system to a level in its full capacity. And that is because we need to manage to contingencies. And when you think about it, capacity is really what costs ratepayers money. And so if you think of solutions like energy storage, we can actually shift operations of the grid closer to its full capacity and really stitch together, again, managing when those contingencies do occur, when a line goes out and you have you know, overflow issues and whether it's an intertie, those types of, I call it microgrid solutions can really help absorb and be a bit of a sponge to give you and buy you some time to react.
A comment about design of resiliency, and I think this is where our grid, with its 15 interconnections with our neighboring provinces and with the U.S., has helped us greatly. The design of our grid with a ring of 345 kV transmission line around the province, sort of supported by 230 kV transmission on our bulk power system, allowed us to have redundant paths for electrical flow. From a generation point of view, we've got access to generation in New England and Nova Scotia and in Quebec if transmission is lost or if generation is lost at specific points to back us up. And so the design of our system has inherently been resilient to I guess, localized disruptions due to weather or outages due to power plant tripping.
Encouraged. So we have a few minutes left. We started a few minutes late. I won't belabor our time here. Maybe we'll take an extra 5 minutes if that's okay with you all. But I'd love to hear any direct questions. But I'm considered old school. This tech thing is kind of freaking me out a little bit. So if anybody wants to actually speak, that'd be great. If not, we can. Sure. Thanks, Ted.
Yeah.
We'll go to Ted first, and then I'll come behind.
Paul really struck a nerve when he talked about you know, kind of the proactive shutting off or de-energizing of the system. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit, Paul, on how the stakeholders, particularly you serve downstream utilities, how they have reacted to that concept and the particular challenges you've had on that side.
Sure. The downstream customers that we serve is it's actually Fortis Alberta. So they're the distribution company that shares the same service area as AltaLink. And to be honest, they've actually been very, we're walking into it hand in hand. And if anything, it's really just a question of pace. It's not so much about whether or not it's a priority or if it's truly a risk. I think we're all bought into that. But it's really around getting our heads wrapped around what the stakeholder engagement plan is and how do we show up as, I'll call it a unified utility. Because at the end of the day, the end customer, they don't care if it's Fortis or if it's AltaLink shutting off the power. They just see it as the utilities. So it is important to show up as a cohesive unit. The piece that we're working through right now as we look to turn on PSPS or have our protocols ready is to first engage with community leaders where PSPS is a potential option as a measure of last resort. We'll engage with community leaders first, and again, it's just going through the concept of what PSPS is and how it's really driven by public safety, and again, re-emphasizing that wildfire mitigation isn't necessarily just about turning power off. That's really a measure of last resort. You know, I talked about component hardening and system hardening, inspections, veg management. Those are all the levers that we need to pull first, and that's actually a key part of our messaging. So after engaging with community leaders, we'll engage with the emergency responders in the area. So again, really want to leverage what those communication protocols are in those localized areas. AltaLink's got a pretty broad footprint, so we deal with a number of different individual municipalities. I think we got about somewhere around 75 to 80 individual municipalities that we have to deal with. So essentially that means 75 to 80 different fire authorities and first responder agencies that we have to work with as well. So it is an extensive process. But you know, how do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time.
Devon or Rod, do you want to? I know the question was addressed to you, but if you have something on that theme, no. Okay. So, last question before me to Alex, I think.
Yep. Thank you. To whoever on the panel would like to take it, but all three of you have talked about extensive reliability upgrades. And have these proactive measures changed your relationship with your corporate insurance provider? And has that, and if yes, has that translated into any new terms with your rate filings?
The changes that we've made today have not interfered with our insurance package. We are part of a group because all the Fortis companies come together. We form part of that, and our contribution to that is such a small piece compared to the Fortis universe. So it did not change our insurance rates of any kind. But one of the things we are looking at doing as it relates to making sure that once you have built resilient and then there's something that happens to your distribution or transmission system, what we call parametric insurance. And so we're in the process of now engaging with the other, with the Carallac group of companies to see if we can get a team of companies to buy into that concept so we can have additional insurance for our T&D infrastructure. Because currently it's a challenge to get insurance on your T&D system. Your plant is insured. You know, those types of assets are insured, but your T&D system is not insured. So we're in the process now of negotiating and having those discussions. Yeah.
Paul, Rod, anything to add?
Not a great deal on the insurance-related side of it. I mean, the kinds of events that I've been speaking to, you know, for us have been in the order of $20 to $30 million events, and you know that's a sizable portion of our net income, and impacts us quite drastically in each year that it occurs. The focus has really been around working with the regulator to have some mechanism for capturing those costs in the rate base, as opposed to trying to swallow them on an annual basis and then report negative net income. So that dialogue is difficult, and it is going on. You know, but for us, insurance has not really been a big discussion.
Absolutely. So I have a spy in the room who's told me that I may have missed a hand somewhere. Please.
And this might not be a question for this panel, but with NERC this morning and talking about their SIP standards and things, and the change in climate and adaptation, is there connections, and again, we might not have the right panel, and I apologize if I put them on the spot, is there connections with those standards groups on building out this resiliency within those standards in North America to maybe help participate or support support, let's say, the arguments or discussions you would have with your regulators on it being a requirement as opposed to a capital expenditure that is decided by the utility?
Anyone?
I can just add that some of the capital works that we've been doing have been in direct response to meeting the SIP requirements that NERC has defined, but mostly around the management of critical assets, whether it be controls and access to protection panels and the like, and also the physical security of getting access to those components of our system as well. So not much discussion at this point in time around SIP in regards to the transmission lines.
There are, so this is an area that I can comment on a little bit. You know, there are, obviously there's reliability standards as well, not just the critical infrastructure standards. And I think there's a lot of overlap, I think, within those and what they're trying to address in terms of resiliency, and perhaps the understanding of those, that crossover, those synergies is still growing for sure. So vegetation management, for one, you know, could create an issue on a system just by physical touch, or it could be in the case of California because of causing or fueling fire. So I think those types of overlaps are certainly becoming more and more well understood as we go deeper into this idea of climate change and resilience and other areas of resilience as well. So I think what we'll do is move to close here, but just one last teaser question on the way out. Just a brief 45-second answer for each. You know, I guess, is there really a broad and deep enough understanding about the risks and the costs of resiliency across all of the stakeholders in the equation? So utility management, utility shareholders, regulators and customers, or ratepayers. We should be using the term customers, of course. You know, where is awareness raising efforts needed most? If I can put you each on the spot.
I'll start and let you guys think about this for a while. Certainly in our jurisdiction, being owned by the province of New Brunswick, our company is under the spotlight whenever reliability is an issue. And of course, when we have severe storms, reliability becomes a question mark, as I mentioned earlier. So those things often then will present themselves at the electric utility or the Energy and Utility Board hearings, you know, when we're applying for our incremental rate increases, and so discussions at those hearings would take place on, you know, well, why do we need more money for vegetation management or right-of-way widening or those kinds of things. So you know, we don't get into the detail of every capital project, but some of those things which are quite near and dear to people's hearts because of the impact of vegetation on transmission and distribution, it has been there, and the dialogue has been, yes, you should spend that money.
Maybe I'll take the easy way out and say all of the above. and the reason is I think the future is not going to be like the past. You know, when we think about climate change, that gives us the opportunity to contemplate all sorts of disasters, some which we've encountered and others which we haven't yet. So I think ultimately it boils down to just always engaging in that dialogue and not to sit on any sort of information, no matter which side of the table you're on.
Yeah, all of the above. I think it's so important for us to, you know, when we think of resiliency, you know, most times we think of the T&D system, but there's so many other areas that can really affect or impact the operations. You know, you have to think of business continuity, and that's how I think about resiliency, business continuity. How do our business continue to operate in the event of a major, whether it be a storm or whether it be some other kind of cyber attack? And I think so we need to focus more holistically, not just on the reliability side of it from the distribution or transmission side of things, but also, you know, other attacks, just the continuation of your business. And so I think that is where a lot of focus should continue to be in, not just the T&D system, but overall, how are we preparing ourselves for, you know, other kinds of business interruption. So I do think, you know, more attention most definitely should be paid to those areas, and just to focus more on cybersecurity your transmission and distribution, your generation issues. Because on the island, you can go from having 100% backup generation to none, and that's how quickly things can happen because we're not connected to an international grid. When you're on the island, that's it. You are the grid. And so there's a whole bunch of other things to think through. So I think we should look at more business continuity as well. Yeah.
All right. Welcome me in thanking the panel for this discussion. And thank you all for the questions and engagement. I'll turn it over to Lawrence.
Thank you, Sabine, for an excellent panel. So, folks, we've come to the end of what has been 1.5 days of stimulating discussion, very good dialogue and exchanging. And so I have the probably difficult task of summarizing everything that was said in the last 6 sessions in less than 5 minutes, which I'm not going to do because I will get some of it wrong. Suffice to say, I just want to give you a quick back story as to how we got here. So about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 of our U.S. and international CEOs who are very involved in transmission asked me a question. And the question was, why aren't we telling the story about transmission and the importance of transmission to the broader audience of the sort of international community, the UN and elsewhere? So it was almost serendipitous when we ended up in a room that looked like the UN, even though we don't have many people here from the UN to hear the message. And when we kicked this off, having the discussion on my team and seeing how we're going to move forward, I didn't even envision we would be in a room that looked like the UN. Needless to say that we would have 15 countries represented, 90 companies represented. So it was a journey and evolution of sort of putting this all together. And one of the things I think we've learned from Tom Kuhn when he said power by association, I think even how you put these kinds of international events together requires a lot of coordination. It requires a lot of sacrifice being made by a lot of people to get it to work. And so, obviously, starting to close this off with a few acknowledgement and thanks, starting first to all of our moderators. Ted, still here, Sabine. I think some of them have left, but those who are here at moderating, thanks so much for your Saifa Rama as well. Thanks to all the panelists. I know it's difficult. Graham traveling from the UK, and we had Bart here and others from Canada and the US and people here from Africa. So it's always difficult to have people coming and have these kind of dialogues because one of the challenges we have when we have these events, we don't know who's on the panel, if they're going to like each other, if they're going to hate each other. Right? And so you bring them to have a debate, and we want to have diverse views, but you want it to be done in a much more professional, cordial level. But I also want in an atmosphere where people can learn and share ideas. So there's no one who's better at anything because we can all learn from each other. And I think that spirit of sharing and learning has been what has sort of made these last 2 days a success. So. Also the audience, the audience, for some people I've spoken to during the breaks, this was a very strange setup because many times you come to an event, there's a podium, there's someone who speaks, there's a panel, but here everyone was on the same level more or less, and the audience liked it, and so I think that got a lot of audience engagement. So thanks again to everyone who's made this possible. And yes, an applause to all of you. You should also know that you've seen photographers running around, videographers, so all the sessions have been video recorded, so they will be made available. You can go back and listen to it. If your colleagues couldn't be here, they can listen to it after the fact as well, and the presentation files will also be made available for you to have. Again, wanting to thank our sponsors, Navigant and Smart Wires, but we also want to thank our partners. Obviously, starting with CEA, Francis and your team here from CEA, Alex and everyone else who made this work. BC Hydro being the host, those who are going to be going a tour this afternoon at BC Hydro, you'll certainly get a feel for what they do. Guideco, our friends here from Guideco, Apua, Carolike. And then, obviously, on my team, when we do any initiative, we always do it as a team. But every team has to have a captain. The captain is the guy or the girl who you blame if it goes wrong, and you recognize them if it goes right. Although I know our captain doesn't want to be put on the spot, but I think everyone has agreed that Daniel did an excellent job as captain of this initiative. So congratulations, Daniel, for your hard work. And the rest of the team supporting Daniel, Jessica, Vanessa, and Kim, who you all met at the outside, they were behind the scenes making sure that they called the passes to to score the goal. All I did was be on the side as a coach, and the coach gets no credit, so I don't need any credit. Other thing I want to say here before we break for lunch is that for those of you who are going on the tours, so at 2 o'clock, I think the bus will be out there for the BC Hydro tour, or 2:15, and then also those who will be going to Power X, you will be meeting with, let's see who's here. I think there's someone from BC Hydro. There he is. Okay, so I think Ms. Gardner will guide you all down to Power X for the thing. 2 quick points. A survey is going to go out via email. We want feedback, even though we all think this was a great event, but I'm sure there are things we could do better. So please send your feedback. Reason being, overwhelming support. We will most likely be doing this event again. I've just spoken to Francis and a few others. And we'll most likely may see if we can get it done at Simon Fraser University. So we may be back here in Vancouver next year or somewhere not too far away. We'll see. But if you're here and you want to sponsor this event, like SmartWires and Navigant did, and I'm sure they'll do it again next year. I'm not putting an impression on you guys, Sabine. But if you do want to be a sponsor of the event, please reach out to Daniel, and he can start getting you set up. Because one of the things about these events, when it goes well the first time, you have a lot of sponsors coming in. The problem is we don't need too many sponsors, but we do want the ones that will contribute not just financially, but also thought leadership, which is what both SmartWires and Navigant has provided. So I think the last thing I should need to tell you is that lunch is going to be served downstairs like yesterday. And those who are doing quick testimonials with Jessica, you've been identified already. If you could meet her at that camera right afterwards to get the testimonials. And then the rest I will say is safe travels back to your home and countries. And we hope to see you next year. And again, thanks for coming.